Recording in
Hello, everyone. This is going to be a somewhat long video. It's going to be about an hour, and I am going to basically do a sample class with PowerPoints or the type of PowerPoint that I would use. And this will be on hieroglyphics, but it's just to give you an idea of the type of instruction that I offer in my teaching sessions and hopefully encourage you to book a session, ideally on my Lesson Pal profile. So I'm going to share that screen with you now, just so you can see my profile. So this is my Lesson Pal profile here. So you can see my name, and then I teach ancient Egypt and generally history about the ancient world as well. And then this is my price for my teaching sessions. So one lesson is $10 and then two is 25. So in terms of payment for or ease of payment for both you and me, doing it through Lesson Pal is probably the easiest. So you can look at my profile a little bit more, and then hopefully, if you're inspired, you can make a request here. So if you make a request, then it will show up and I will respond to you. So as I said, just to kind of give you a taste, I'm going to go over a good chunk of a PowerPoint that I created for a class on hieroglyphics. So I'm going to put it in this slide show form. So this is just the first one. So this is the chronology of Pharaonic Egypt, which broadly speaking is when Egypt was an independent state, and it's a little bit over 3,000 years. So this is the order of the chronology that Egyptologists use. And generally speaking, the Pharaonic Egypt is divided into intermediate periods, so times when the centralized authority of the state broke up and there were competing families for power. And then you have kingdoms, which are times when you have one family that was in charge of the whole state. And so you start with the pre-dynastic, which is before state unification. And then you go to, generally in terms of Pharaonic Egypt, the late period is the last, or independent Egypt. The late period is the last large period, because after the late period, you have the Battle of Actium in 31 or 32 BC, which is when Egypt becomes a province of Rome. And then these are the abbreviations that you'll see for the objects in terms of when they date, because we're going to be going back and forth in time in terms of the objects' dates. So this site, the full name is hieroglyphics step by step. So this site here, it did briefly go down, but now it's back up, which makes me very happy because it is quite a good resource and site to look through. So one of the basic things to know about hieroglyphics is there's no vowels. So anytime you see a vowel in modern translations, that is Egyptologists' best educated guess about what that word sounded like, which also plays into the different spellings in both older and current Egyptology publications that you'll see for different words, or sometimes even different rulers' names, because we're not fully sure how they sounded. The last hieroglyphic inscription in terms of what was written down that we can date was written down August 24th in the year 394 AD at the Temple of Philae. And it was understood still by sectors of the population after that. But at least as far as I know, the last inscription written down that we have been able to date in hieroglyphics comes in that year of 394. So throughout this PowerPoint, I will be doing these screen shares of different grammar features from the step-by-step site. So this is an example of that. So you see the link there. So this is just sort of goes over the very basic features of hieroglyphic writing, kind of how it functions and how it's used. So hieroglyphics, as it says, are used in two major ways in ancient Egyptian text and objects. So you have them used as ideograms and phonograms. Ideograms can be a sign or signs that convey both sound and meaning. So the most common ideogram that's used to illustrate this example, which they use here, is the PR. So this image, which depicts a house in plan, represents the sound combination of P and R, which together it's PR. And this is most commonly seen in either the word for house, but this can also be, sometimes you'll see it as a determinative, which is, we'll get into what that is in a few slides later on. Then you also have ideograms that are used to convey meaning with no sounds, and those are the determinatives. So broadly speaking, those are determinatives tell you which category of objects a hieroglyphic word falls into. So they always come at the end of the hieroglyphic word, but they're not meant to be read as one of the hieroglyphic symbols. And in later slides, I'll show you examples of determinatives in action that hopefully will illustrate that a little bit better. And then you have phonograms, which indicate the sounds of signs. And sorry, we have a dog and also a cat in the house. So that was what that was about there. So the ideograms are, or can be further broken down into unilaterals, which are signs that represent one sound, bilaterals, which are signs that represent two sounds, and trilaterals, which are signs that represent three sounds. The unilaterals, which are shown here, are roughly speaking can be likened to our alphabet, and they are some of the most common hieroglyphic signs that you will see. So we have the actual sign, so the actual image, which usually represents something from the ancient Egyptian culture. So in this case, it is a vulture. And then you have what's called the transliteration. So how the ancient Egyptians would have actually phonetically or shown that sign in the hieroglyph hieroglyphics. Then we have the phonetic value, which is, as far as Egyptologists can tell, what it may have sounded like. And then we have what object from ancient Egyptian culture that picture is thought to represent. And these are in order, or in the order that you should probably learn them, because look at dictionaries. This is the order that they're put down in dictionaries. So if you don't learn them in this order, you're going to have a harder time looking up words later on. And then if you look here, when they are when they're shown with their transliteration in modern translations, particularly from some museum online searches, you'll sometimes see this for some of these symbols. So for this, you'll sometimes see the following for some of these symbols. So for instance, for the vulture, which the transliteration of that looks like our number 3. But in the sort of first stage of the translation, in some of the objects online, you will see that what looks like our number 3, you'll see that phonetic value represented as a capital A. And then if you go down to here, which is Egyptologists think is a forearm, so it has the sort of pronouncement, or the pronouncement Egyptologists thought this is I think I-N. The phonetic way that you'll see this written out in some instances is a lowercase a. And then you also have things like this. So you have first H through fourth H. And again, in some modern translations, phonetically, you'll see all those H's, so here to here, represented as capital H. And then the same thing for underlined T, which phonetically is sometimes shown as a capital T, and underlined D, which is shown as capital D. Also, for some unilaterals, particularly the N and the M, the more common unilateral for N is water. So this image here. Sometimes, for different grammatical reasons, you will see the unilateral N represented like this, though, which represents a particular type of royal crown. A similar thing for M. So the more common unilateral way to represent M is the owl. So this here. Sometimes, again, for different grammatical reasons, you will see M represented with this unilateral image. So that's just something to keep in mind. So this is a object that's in the Metropolitan, and this is an example of the phonetically capital letters that you saw here. So in the Metropolitan Museum, a fair number of the objects that you can find in their online collection search have actually been translated. with both the English translations and then the full transliteration as well. So this is one of these objects that has, at least last time I checked, has both of those. So I'm going to go to the translation, and so I'm going to go to view more. So it gives you the English translation, but then it gives you that full, or that basically beginning transliteration. So you have NB, or Lord, that T, that capital A, so that's that vulture or Alf. You have one of the H's, one of those capital H's, and that capital D here. So this is one of those unilateral, either first through fourth H. This is that underlined D, unilateral. Then, like I said, you have bilateral signs, and these are the most common ones of those. So again, those are signs that are two sounds. And then the literals, so those signs that represent three sounds. This is just what we've already gone over, but I took the key bits, so you don't necessarily have to read those full paragraphs from the step-by-step site. So phonograms, like I said, are used to indicate the sounds of signs, so they're sound signs. So this is where you get those transliterations. So phonograms can then be further broken down into the unilaterals, the bilaterals, and trilaterals. And there's about 500-ish common signs. And unilateral signs are the most common hieroglyphic signs, and they're the one sound. And then the bilateral 2, and then the trilateral 3. And then you have the determinatives that I briefly mentioned, and those are signs that come at the end of words to basically tell you which category of things that word falls into. So you don't read determinatives as a hieroglyphic letter, but it tells you the sort of general category of words, because hieroglyphic words and sentences don't have spaces. So the determinatives are kind of like our periods, because they give you that clue that, okay, this word is ended, and then after determinatives or determinatives, you then start to read the next word. This is some different ways that hieroglyphs can be read. So the baseline to read hieroglyphs is from right to left. But the way that you know for sure is you find people or animals within that hieroglyphic text or hieroglyphic line, and whichever way they're facing, that's the direction that you start to read in. So you have this first example here, so from right to left. So what looks like a human face, and then you have what looks like a duck. Those are all facing to the right. So that tells you, okay, you start to read here, you end here. So that's what these numbers are. Is it you start 1, 2, and then you end with that 13 and 14. In this next example, the people and the animals are facing to the left. So that tells you you start to read at the left. So you start to read here, you end at the right. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hieroglyphics can also be read from up to down. So a lot of times in funerary stele, particularly from the Middle Kingdom and after, you'll actually see combinations. So the sort of general text is the is is this horizontal text, either like this or like this. And then the text that talks particularly about the person who commissioned this and sort of the head guy or gal is in this or is in these vertical columns like this. And again, to sort of help to key you into which direction you start to read, which vertical column you start with. So pretend that there was multiple vertical rows here, and they were all like this. So this person, just based on this, they're facing to the right. So that's how you know you would start with this one because it's the only one here. But if there were 4 of these vertical columns, they were all facing towards the right, you would start at the 4th one and you would end with this one. And you'll see some examples of that, I think, either in this PowerPoint, or if I didn't put it in this PowerPoint, I'll bring it up in the Metropolitan object search because it's one of the objects from the Metropolitan that has a good example of this in action. So then we have the determinatives that I already talked about. So again, the determinatives sort of tell you what category of words the object falls into. So I'm just going to read this formal blurb from the step site. So this is a sign that comes at the end of words to indicate their meaning. So in this group of words, you have the sign with the circle, so that image here represents the sun disk and is a determinative at the end of words, indicating the sun and its rising light and the notion of time. So if you look at these words here, this is the determinative that you see at the end of each of those words. So you have R, which is the mouth, that forearm, which is the iron. And so this is a word that means the sun. So the hieroglyphs that you read individually in this word are just these 2. This is the determinative. Then you have another word that means day. So you have, in this case, it's the regular H, the R again, and then the double U. So HRW. So this makes up the hieroglyphic word. This is the determinative. You have another word that means shadow. So you have the S with like the little V on it. So that here, which is that, and then that W again, and then the determinative. You have then a word that means to rise. So W, B, which is the foot, and then N. So in this case, it's the more regular unilateral N that you kind of tend to see. So these 3 images are the actual hieroglyphic word that you translate. This is the determinative. And then you have a word that means yesterday. So S, F. So again, these 2 actual hieroglyphics in the word that you translate, this is the determinative. You know this is F, or the horned or fanged serpent, because it has these little horns on top. I think if it was just D, it would be the regular snake. So we're going to go back to the unilateral rolls just to kind of show you. So this is F, so it's the horned viper. So again, you can tell it's F because it has those horns. Versus the other, the regular snake, which is the underlined D. So if you're looking at the way that's represented phonetically in some of the translations for objects, it's that capital D. But that's part of the challenge of hieroglyphics, is you really need to look for those details, because sometimes those details give you those clues, which is also why it's helpful to have the original object or context or full inscription in front of you, because that again gives you those small clues. And then this is another example of a set of determinatives with the sign that refers to boats, and then these are all words that have to do with boats, or ships. So you have that determinative at each of their ends. So again, for all these words, this chunk are the actual hieroglyphics, and this is the determinative. And then for some of the unilaterals and some of the bi as well as trilaterals, they also function as prepositions. So they can function both as roughly like our alphabet letter F, but also the word, the preposition word, meaning to, for instance, go in, because M is a common one, particularly on objects. And I think it's this PowerPoint that you'll see examples of that as well. So I'm not going to go over every slide that I have in this PowerPoint in this video. If you do take my class on hieroglyphics, you will learn this as well, but this part of the PowerPoint goes over the sort of history and how we were able to translate hieroglyphics, at least in the Western world, and kind of that process, at least for us, the process of rediscovery of how to read. There is more and more evidence, and more people are now looking at medieval Arabic texts as well, and it's becoming clear that they also made strides and were figuring out, or trying to figure out, certain aspects of hieroglyphic text and writing as well. So I'm just going to go past these, or past those slides. These are text if you want to really dive into the full study. These are books that I used and found helpful. So this is a full textbook here. So there's different phases of the hieroglyphic language. And so the sort of phase that students tend to start with is called Middle Egyptian, because once you have Middle Egyptian as sort of the baseline, you can understand, or at least get to know, other variants of the hieroglyphic script that emerged earlier and then a little bit later on as well. So that's why this textbook specifies Middle Egyptian. And then this is just a dictionary that I found helpful, because at the end of this textbook there is a dictionary dictionary, but it's Egyptian to English. And so it doesn't have like all the words. So if you get this, then you just get a wider dictionary base to kind of work from. This is some other sources, so not necessarily text, but YouTube channels that go over different aspects of hieroglyphics, and there's sort of some mini lessons, particularly in this one here. And then this is a channel that goes over objects and gives you the read through the full translation with you. And this is the home site or the home page for the site that a lot of these grammar screens are from. And this also has, I'm just going to click on it actually. So if you don't want to go the full textbook route, this actually is the site where it takes you through a series of lessons where you can learn hieroglyphs as well. So if you go to learn hieroglyphs, it takes you through the basic grammar and things like that. And then there's throughout this, there's quizzes as well. And then there's this Let's Read tab once you sort of get that baseline of lessons in. So it takes objects that have hieroglyphic inscriptions and it translates them with the full translation. So you can sort of challenge and test yourself there as well. One other thing that I do want to at least briefly mention, our calendar years in terms of dating that we give to Egyptian history and the sort of dating of objects actually was not something that the ancient Egyptians would have recognized. So the way that the ancient Egyptians dated things was they tended to date things by the year of the ruler that was on the throne. So this is from an object as the caution, or as the caution says, Egyptologists sometimes for some of these translations for this database don't find these all the way correct, but this does give you the kind of flavor of how the Egyptians dated things. So that's why I kept it. So this is the king. So Amen-Nos. It's his year 4 under the majesty of, and then it gives basically one of the royal titles. And then here. And so it's from things like this that Egyptologists have then extrapolated the calendar year dates that you see in textbooks and things like that. So I'm not going to go over this part in this video, but again, if you take my course, these next few slides go over the sort of emergence of the hieroglyphic language and the different phases of it that we have in Egyptian material culture. And if you want to find more of this out for yourself, the Digital Egypt for Universities by University College London. And Stephen Quirk seems to be the main gentleman that's worked on this site, is a really good source just kind of for the general study of ancient Egypt as well. So that's another web source that I highly recommend. So this is the chart from that, or a chart from that Digital Egypt site that shows you the evolution of the Egyptian language. So these are the approximate calendar dates up here. And then the different colors represent different phases, or phases of the language. So you have Egyptian hieroglyphs that sort of were around these general calendar years. And then you have hieratic, which was around a little bit later, and it's kind of a simplified form of hieroglyphic. And then you have these later variants here as well. So this again is, these next few examples are from the step-by-step site, and they are from it's those first few initial lessons. So if you want to find the tab, this is from the Learn Hieroglyphics tab. And I chose this word in particular to kind of highlight because it illustrates another grammatical feature that you see in ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs that's called honorary transposition, which basically means that the more important word comes first, or the more important picture or sound sign comes first in the actual writing of the hieroglyphs, but second when you do the English translation. So you have this word that is traditionally, or tends to be translated as priest. But the literal hieroglyphs, the literal translation of this word is servant, which is this dotted HM. So this here, an implied of the, and then God. And God is this N underlined T, which is not super easy to see, but it's the underlined T, which if you're copying and pasting this, it will turn into the capital T R, which is the word for God, which is this. So you have, because the word God is more important word, it's than the word servant, in the hieroglyphic inscription, that word, that in this case, it's a bilateral, and it's what looks like a flag, is first. The word for servant is next. But if you look at those hieroglyphs that are then translated and written down before they're translated into English, it's the word for servant that's first. So here, and then the word for God. And then when you translate it into English, again, it's the word for servant that's first. So this, and then the word for God, which is this next. So that's something else that you'll see in some examples of Egyptian material culture as well. These are some common titles. Again, this is from the Learn Hieroglyphics tab in some of those initial lessons. And this gives you some examples of determinatives in action. So here we have a secular title, so that word there, that can be translated as governor or mayor. So this chunk is the actual hieroglyph, so this section here. This, what looks like a man or a person, is the determinative. And this is your hint that, okay, this is a title of some kind because there's a human. That's the determinative. You then have this word here that can be translated as overseer of the chamber. And again, I've broken down the hieroglyphs and chunked out here. And then this is the determinative. So just this chunk are all of these sound signs. This is the this is the determinative that tells you what general category um, of thing this word falls into. So you then have some common religious titles. And this is, again, we already went over this. This next word here is another word that can be translated as priest. Literally, it means pure one, and you also sometimes see it as a type of religious office. So this wob is this chunk here, and this is the determinative. You also have the word for lector, priest, down here. So in this case, there is no determinative because this under, again, it's kind of hard to see. It's either underlined or elliptical H, R, Y is this chunk here, and then into that dotted H, because that is B. So that's the foot. So there's no determinative there. I alluded to this a little bit when I was talking about unilaterals at kind of the beginning of this PowerPoint. And this also goes into what I was saying about it's very helpful to have the full original context or the full original object with all the hieroglyphs in front of you. Because without those context clues, if you're just looking at it on a piece of paper, different words can look like the same thing. So this is an example where I just used that first unilateral in the order that it tends to be good to learn them in, which is that vulture. So what looks like our number 3, if you're seeing it phonetically represented, sometimes you'll see it as that capital A. But if you look at this, just that word, each one of these look like the exact same. And it's the determinative and what comes or what comes after that vulture that tells you how this word is functioning and how to actually fully translate it. So you have this first example here. So in this case, this is the word, and it's a word that means tread, to a place maybe. So this seems to be some kind of verb. And you know that because that foot there is the determinative. This down here is the vulture again. And then you see this. So this tells you that it's singular, but because there is not the determinative of a foot, but just the vulture, that tells you that, or bird in general, that tells you that this is the word for vulture or one bird. So then you have some other words here where you see the determinatives come into play as well. So you have vulture, vulture, and then the determinative. That dash, if you just see the one dash, that tells you that this is a word in its singular form. Multiple dashes is a word in plural form. And so this then tells you the mound of, that this word means mound of ruins. But it's the determinative that are your sort of key final clue in all three of these cases. So then you have this word for Nubian chieftain, maybe. Again, we're still trying to figure out all the translations. So you have vulture, vulture, T, and vulture. And then the determinative of a Nubian chieftain. The word for windy, vulture, J, double U, determinative. A lot of times the W will be one of the birds. Sometimes it's this image though here. And then these again are more words where I've chunked up the hieroglyphic part of the word and then where you have the determinative. So vulture or elf, I think that's how you pronounce it, J and S. This is going back to what I was talking about, where without the context, you have words that are spelled the same but actually mean different things. So you have J, which can be a suffix pronoun meaning first person singular, so I, me, myself, my. It can also be the word for reeds or leaves, and you know that it's that difference because there's that determinative and there's the multiple dashes that's telling you plural form, not singular form. And then you have J with this determinative there. That can also be some kind of interjection as well. All right. So again, because I'm hoping to give everyone a taste of what they can get in further sessions, I'm not going to go through these slides, but these are more dictionary examples from that step by step, and I've chunked them up to kind of give you an idea of how determinatives and some other things operate within words. So now we're going to get into some actual objects. So these are objects from ancient Egypt that have been found in different archaeological contexts with hieroglyphic inscriptions that have been that I've translated and am now going to go over with you. And I've sort of chunked them up by theme. So these objects, at least for these next few objects, have to do with the monarchy or kind of the royal family in general. So this is from that Let's Read tab on that step-by-step site. So I have done the chunking up based on the translations that have been given for each object on that tab. So the individual entries give you what the object is, and they give you, I think, the date as well. So this is the seal of Neferhotep. He was a private, or it looks like he was a royal individual. So the first thing to notice when looking at this object is that there's two basic registers. And in this case, you read them vertically. So there's register A and register B. So you're figuring out, okay, which register do I start with? Well, look at the animals or the people. In this case, I don't really see any people, but I do see animals. And which way are they facing? So this one here, they're all facing to the right. So that tells me I start with this register here. So Sa Re is the son, an implied of Re or Ra. So apparently, and this is something that I just recently learned, the pronunciation of that deity changed from the old kingdom to the new kingdom. So at one of those points, Egyptologists think the pronouncement was closer to Re, and then at the other point, they think it was closer to Ra, and my brain has forgotten which goes with which, but that's why I gave both pronunciations there. And this, the son of Re or Ra. So this hieroglyphic chunk here is a common royal title that you see, I think, starting in the Middle Kingdom, and then is pretty common by the New Kingdom. And then you have this person's name, Nefertep. So Neferhotep. So again, we talked about the very beginning of this PowerPoint that they don't have consonants. And so this E is Egyptologists' best guess. And I might have meant vowels when I said that. And so this Neferhotep, so this chunk here, that is the ruler's or this person's name. And you know it's a royal name because it's in a cartouche, which is what this shape here is. So this is that Neferhotep. And so the actual hieroglyphs in this are this NFR, which is this here, and then this dotted HTP, which is this chunk here. So now we go on to the second register here. So we're starting here. So MS, which is born. So that's that hieroglyph here. Of, which is the N. So here, of. Unimplied the. Royal, which is that NSWT. So here, mother, which is that MWT, which is this. And then that royal mother's name, which is Kemi. So Kemi. So KMJ, which is this. So KMJ. You know that this is the K and not the NB because it has this little like flag or sort of ribbon thing hanging off of it. So again, that detail is what gives you that final clue. So similar to the horned serpent, where you know it's the horned serpent, which is F if it has the two horns on top. If it's just the regular snake, you know that it's the underlined D. This is a plate with the name of King Mesis, so from the late period. So again, it's in that register form. To figure out which register you look at, first you find which way any animals or humans are facing. So right away, I see this, what looks like a bird here, here, here. They're all facing towards the left. So that's how you know, okay, I start with this register, go down and end with this register here. So you have this N underlined, or sorry, N underlined TR, which is God. That, so this here, that NFR, which is good. So here, and this is, so there's an applied the here. Good God is another common title of rulers and monarchs that you'll see on a lot of their material culture objects from, I think from the Old Kingdom on. And then we have Lord, which is the NB, which is here. And then the title of the two lands is this Tau way. So T vulture WY, which is this. So applied the, good God, Lord, unimplied of, or implied of the lands. Lord again, so NB again, so here. Ire hit, which is cult practices, which is this chunk here. So this is the Erie, so the JR. This is the hit, so under or elliptical HT, which is this. And then you have King of Upper and Lower Egypt, which is this Neswy Bidi chunk here. So another common ruler title that you see, and that's this chunk here. And then you go on to this next register here. And so then you have basically one of the names of this ruler. So starting here to here, and that's the Gen Jeb Ray or Ra. So what's in the cartouche here. And then the Sa Ra, son implied of Ra, so, or Ray, so this chunk here. Or sorry, this is the, I got a little bit ahead of myself. So this chunk up here is the Gen Ham Jeb Ray, because then this chunk is that son of Ra here. So this is the son unimplied of Ra. And then you have another royal name in a cartouche. So another one of these guys' names, because definitely by the New Kingdom, and the late period comes after the New Kingdom, rulers had multiple names, and the Egyptological term for that is I think it's the fivefold titulary, and the different names express different aspects of kind of the ideology of rulership in ancient Egypt. So you have Amhos 2, which is this chunk here, so that here. And then you have the word for Toth. So I think that's this chunk here. So there, because then the great God part is this N underlined TR ion. So here, and this is the great part. This is the God part. So unimplied the great, God. Lord, again, that NB, so Lord, unimplied of, and then shy at. So this is the hieroglyphics, which match this here. And again, the E is the current Egyptologist's best guess of how this full word sounded. This is a plaque with the name of King Pries, also from the late period. And again, you see some common titles and royal forms of address here as well. So first off, to figure out whether you start at the right or the left, you see the animals, they're facing towards the right. So that tells you, okay, I start here, and I end here. So first you have the good God phrase that we saw in the last object. So this here. And it's those same set of hieroglyphs here. So that NTR Nefer. And so this is the good, and then this is that God, so that N underlined TR. And then this is one of the gentleman's names, so starting here, ending here. These hieroglyphs and the cartouche, so Habre, which is another name for Breeze. And then we have eternal life. So eternal life. So this is the eternal part, or sorry, this is the eternal part here. So underlined D and T. So this hieroglyph here, so you see that just regular snake without horns, so that tells you that's underlined D and not F. And then you have that T, and so those two unilaterals together make up the word for, or the word that can be translated as eternal. And then you have Ankh, which is this here, and that one of the ways that can be translated is the word for life, which is here. This is a pierced faience plaque from the New Kingdom. So it's in registers, but the registers are not quite as distinct as some of the other objects that we've just seen. So you have basically three words here. So the first word that you have is sat, or at least I think that's how that's pronounced, which is the word for daughter. And I'm trying to not get that word to be covered when I pan over to it. So I'm going to try to do that one more time. But it's this first front word here. And it's the word for daughter. And it is this chunk here. So we've seen at least part of this in hieroglyphs before, which is the word for son in that son of Ra or Re phrase. What makes this word daughter, which is the feminine form, is the addition of that T, which Egyptologists think originally represented a bread loaf. And then we have the word for king, so that NSWT, so that hieroglyph here. And then the word or her name, which is MR, so Mer it. So again, the E's are best guesses that are added by current day Egyptologists, and the original hieroglyphs that this picture or image represented is that MR with an implied T. We then have two more objects. We have the first object on the left here, which is a foundation plaque that is inscribed with one of the names of Tutmosis the Fourth from the New Kingdom. So that is this object here, which this is the translation that belongs to that. And so again, you see the idea of registers here, but they're vertical registers. So to figure out which one you read first, again, look at the way animals or people are facing. So in this case, they're all facing towards the right. And so that's how you know, okay, you start with this vertical column here and end with this one. So again, we see that Nefer, that good God phrase here. We then have one of the names of Tutmosis IV, which is Men Kep-Eru. So Men Kep-Eru in this cartouche here. And then we have the sort of next chunk, which is beloved of Moon. So this is another case where I think you see that honorary transposition coming into play. Because Moon is a deity, and Moon is this JM dash RE, which is this chunk here. But in the English translation, the first word is, the first word that's translated is that beloved. So that MRY. And that is down here. So this is where reading it becomes, or can become, a little bit complicated, because you kind of have to go down and then back up. So you have the good God Men Kep-Eru, beloved and implied of Amun Ra. And then you have this next chunk, which is starting at this NSW, which is the king of His Majesty's Palace, finishing with belonging to him as a, sorry, I'm trying to get rid of that, as a child of, there we go, as a child of Anubis. So for this chunk, the king of His Majesty's Palace, belonging to him as a child of Anubis, you have to go to this vertical register here. So the king of is this NSW, which is this here. And then the of, so it's implied of, His Majesty's is this dotted HM.F. So that F in this case is functioning as pronoun for him, which is this chunk here. So dotted HM. So that's the Majesty or Majesties. And then that is the pronoun him or his. And then palace, which is this NT or N underlined TRW. I think the PR part is there as well, is this chunk here. And then you have belonging to him is a part that I'm not fully sure of, but I think it's all in this word here, because then the as is one of those pronouns that also in other contexts can appear as a unilateral. So in this case, it's M. So as and then a child of a Nubis. And I think they're actually missing Anubis here because this underlined HRW. Okay, so this is the child part. Okay, so I'm going to end this video and hopefully reconvene with you guys a little bit later.